My name is Eleanor, and I'm 39 years old. I'm standing in the grand entryway of the family mansion. It is the same house where I grew up. My sister Abigail is laughing in the living room with her husband. My mother is swirling her wine glass and saying, well, Eleanor never really needed much. She always preferred small things. The room falls silent as I place a folder on the coffee table. Inside is the deed. My name is on it. Only mine. You cannot be serious, my father says. You do not deserve this house. But the truth is, I bought it 3 years ago when the bank was about to seize it from them. They called me a fool for my little business. They dismissed me for years. Now I hold the keys to everything they thought belonged to them. Before we go back to the beginning, tell me, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? If this story touches something in you, please subscribe. Because tomorrow, everything changes. Asterisk, my name is Eleanor Monroe, and I am the second daughter of Thomas and Judith Monroe. Growing up, I was the quiet one. I was the daughter who brought home straight A's, who followed the rules, who kept her head down and her hands busy. I loved painting, writing, and small, quiet things that made my heart full, even if nobody else noticed. My sister, Abigail, was different. She was dazzling, loud, ambitious. She knew how to perform, how to charm, how to take up space in every room she entered. She became a lawyer. The whole family beamed when she passed the bar exam. My father opened a bottle of vintage wine. My mother cried tears of joy. When I told them I had started an online business designing home interiors, my mother smiled tightly and said, "That is nice, dear. But when are you going to get a real job?" I remember how my father laughed. "You always had a good imagination. Maybe you can decorate the attic. That dusty little space with one small window, the place where I used to hide when I needed to cry in peace." I smiled and nodded. I always did. They saw me as the nice one, the helpful one. The one who would come early to help set the table, stay late to clean, and never complain when plans were made without asking me. In truth, I was exhausted. I worked 10-hour days building my brand, taking on difficult clients, and learning every inch of the business world they said I would never belong to. But I never shared those details. I did not need applause, or at least that is what I told myself. They saw my work as a hobby. "She just arranges furniture online," my sister would say with a smirk. But behind that screen, I was working with major clients, designing million-dollar properties, and building a following of over 200,000 people who loved what I created. Still, at every family gathering, I was Eleanor, the little one. The one who did not make waves. The one who would understand if they gave Abigail more, because she has a family to take care of. It always came back to that. Abigail had a husband, 2 children, a respectable job. I had none of those things. They did not see the life I had built. They did not care to look. And I stopped expecting them to, but I never stopped watching. I never stopped remembering, and quietly I started preparing. There are moments that do not leave you, no matter how many years pass. They stay like photographs in your mind, unframed, unseen by anyone else, but never forgotten. I remember the Christmas when I was 16. I had spent the entire week designing a hand-painted portrait for my mother. I saved up for the canvas and worked late into the night for days, trying to make it perfect. When she opened it, she smiled politely and said, "How sweet. I will find a place for it. Maybe in the laundry room." An hour later, Abigail gave her a silk scarf she had picked up last minute at the mall. My mother gasped like she had just received a diamond necklace. "Oh, Abigail, you always give the most elegant gifts." She wrapped it around her neck immediately. That was the first time I truly understood that some hearts are only open to certain people. Another memory, my college graduation. I had worked hard for that degree, paid for it myself, took freelance jobs, skipped weekends, and studied while others partied. When I walked across that stage, my parents clapped, but only briefly. The loudest cheers came from my best friend, Emily, sitting in the back row. She had always believed in me. Later that evening, my father said, "You know, when Abigail graduated law school, the whole firm sent flowers. It was such a big moment." I nodded. I always nodded. Even birthdays became reminders. On Abigail's 30th, They threw her a garden party with catering, lights strung through the trees, and a string quartet. When I turned 30, they sent a card in the mail. It arrived 3 days late. They were not cruel. That is what made it harder. It was not that they screamed or insulted me. It was the silence, the small dismissals. The way they looked through me like I was wallpaper, comfortable, familiar, but never worthy of attention. The most painful moment came the day my grandmother passed. She had always been my champion, the only one who truly saw me. At the funeral, I stood quietly, holding my grief like a secret. Abigail gave a eulogy. My mother wept. My father held her hand. Nobody asked if I wanted to speak. Nobody asked how I was doing. And I was too used to being small to say anything. Later that night, I sat alone in the attic of the family home, the same one they used for old boxes and forgotten furniture. The air was dusty, the window fogged. But I remember sitting there and thinking, if this is all they ever give me, I will make something out of it. I began to dream of more, not revenge, not riches, just recognition. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be valued, not for what I could give them, but for who I truly was. Over time, I stopped bringing up my work. I stopped sharing updates. Every time I tried, I was met with that same smile, that soft, dismissive smile that said, "That is nice, dear, but it does not really matter." But it did matter. To me, it mattered. Those little moments, those quiet hurts, they built something inside me. A foundation, strong and silent. While they celebrated Abigail's every move, I was building something of my own. Something no one could take away. I was not small. I had simply learned how to grow in the shadows, and soon I would bring my work into the light. For years I said very little. I kept my voice soft, my presence smaller than it truly was. But what they never understood was that silence does not mean weakness. Sometimes silence is where strength is made, while Abigail was making headlines. At her firm and posting vacation photos from Italy, I was building something of my own quietly, carefully. And without permission, it began with a single room redesigned for a friend of a friend. Then came another, then a stranger who found my work online. I created mood boards, sourcing guides, and full design plans. At first, I charged almost nothing. I just wanted to prove I could do it. Within 2 years, I had a waiting list. I taught myself everything: how to register a business, how to manage taxes, how to deal with difficult clients. I read late into the night and took online courses in marketing, branding, and negotiation. While my parents thought I was just playing online, I was sending contracts to celebrity clients and furnishing penthouses they would never set foot in. I started saving every penny. I lived simply. No vacations, no designer handbags, no unnecessary costs. I reinvested everything into my business. And when the pandemic hit and Abigail's law firm began laying people off, my business doubled. People wanted beautiful homes. They were spending more time inside. They wanted comfort, beauty, peace. And that is what I gave them. In my 4th year, I bought my first property, a small, neglected townhouse in a quiet part of the city. I spent months renovating it, learning plumbing, electrical work, even basic carpentry. I hired local workers and paid them well. Then I flipped the house and sold it for triple the purchase price. My parents never asked what I was doing with my time. If they had, I would have told them the truth. But they never did. They assumed I was still freelancing for pocket money. To them, success only looked one-way: suits, titles, framed degrees. And because I did not match their definition, they never looked closer. But the biggest moment came when I found the listing. It was the family mansion, my childhood home. The same house my parents had nearly lost in the market crash 5 years earlier. I knew they had taken out multiple loans against it. I knew Abigail had tried to help, but the debts were too deep. They never told me it was in foreclosure, but I saw it. I recognized the floors in the photographs, the carved staircase, the bay windows in the dining room. They were trying to sell it through a private listing before the bank took it for good. I bought it quietly, through a trust. I hired Eleanor to handle the paperwork. I made sure everything was legal, clean, and invisible. The deed was transferred into my name under a holding company I had created years ago. No one in my family knew. They continued living there. They paid no rent. They hosted holidays.
They
Praised Abigail for keeping the family together. And I let them believe they were still in control, because I was not interested in revenge. I was building peace. I was building security. I was building something they had never given me, stability without conditions. And still, I kept quiet. I continued to design homes. I continued to grow my client base. I hired 2 assistants and finally gave myself a proper office space. Some weeks I made more than Abigail's monthly salary. And still, they asked me to bring the potato salad to family dinners, as if I had nothing better to do. I smiled. I nodded. I brought the salad, because I knew something they did not. The attic they always offered me as a joke. It was mine now. And so was everything above it. It started with a phone call in early November. My mother's voice was filled with excitement, the kind that made her speak faster than usual. We are planning a family Thanksgiving this year, the whole weekend. Everyone under one roof, like old times. Old times. The phrase made something cold stir in my stomach, but I said nothing. We want it to be special, she continued. Abigail and the kids will be there. We thought it might be nice to use the mansion again. Even though it is technically still yours, of course. Technically? That word again. They had grown used to living in the house rent-free. I had allowed it. They thought it was charity or oversight. It was neither. It was grace, something I was no longer sure they deserved. We thought maybe you could help decorate, she added, like a polite afterthought. You always had a knack for things like that, I agreed quietly. I always did. Over the next few days, my phone buzzed, constantly with messages. A group chat started by Abigail titled Family Feast Planning. Photos of table arrangements, messages about who was bringing what dish, and which bedrooms everyone wanted. Nobody asked where I would sleep. They had given the master suite to Abigail and her husband. Of course, the children would take the guest room. My parents would take their usual bedroom. That left one place. The attic. Hope you do not mind, Abigail wrote with a smiley face. It is still your favorite little hideout, right? I did not reply. I simply stared at the screen. The same attic where I used to cry in secret. The same attic where I dreamed of escaping. They still thought that was all I deserved. The days passed quickly. I ordered floral centerpieces, arranged for professional cleaning, and hired a local chef to assist with the larger dishes. I made it perfect, as I always did, even while knowing my effort would be invisible. When I arrived that Wednesday, the house was already full of voices. Abigail's children were running through the halls. Her husband was pouring drinks, and my father was laughing loudly in the living room. Eleanor, my mother said, kissing my cheek. You are finally here. Could you take the boxes up to the attic? That will be your space for the weekend. I carried them upstairs in silence. It was clean now, but still cold. A single bed in the corner. A thin curtain over the window. It was not disrespect in their minds. It was simply what they thought I would accept. I sat on the bed for a long time that night, watching the shadows on the wall. I could hear Abigail's laughter echoing through the vents. It was like I had never left, like I had never built a life outside these walls. But I had. And I was not the girl in the attic anymore. The next morning, I woke early and walked through the house, remembering each room. I stood in the kitchen where my grandmother used to hum while making cinnamon rolls. I looked at the fireplace my father used to gather us around on Christmas Eve, and I walked past the formal dining room, now set for a grand meal. It felt like a museum of memories, some warm, most forgotten. As I walked past the study, I overheard my father speaking in a low voice. I think after the holiday we should just make it official. Transfer the deed to Abigail. She is the one keeping the family together, my mother replied. Eleanor will understand. She has always been flexible. I froze. They were planning to give my house away. To Abigail. Without asking. Without discussing. Without even acknowledging what it would mean. It was not about money. It was about being erased. I stood there, breath held, heartbeat loud in my ears. They did not know the papers were already signed. They did not know I had secured everything. They were trying to take what I already owned and doing it with smiles. On their faces, the dinner was still 2 days away, but in my heart, something had already broken, and something else had begun to rise. Thanksgiving Day arrived with cold wind and golden leaves swirling in the yard. Inside the mansion, the air was warm with the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon. The table was set with silver cutlery and porcelain plates my mother had saved. For special occasions, it should have felt like a celebration. But something inside me stayed quiet, watching. We gathered around the long table at exactly 2 o'clock. My father stood to make a speech. He cleared his throat and lifted
his glass. "This year we give thanks for family, for health, and for strength during hard times," he said.
"And most of all, we give thanks for Abigail. She has sacrificed so much to keep us afloat, and today we want to show her our appreciation." He turned to Abigail and handed her a manila envelope. Everyone clapped. I did not move. Abigail opened the envelope and read the papers. Then she gasped and covered her mouth in fake surprise. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked, eyes wide, clearly rehearsed. "Yes," my father said proudly. "The deed. The house is now yours." The room erupted in cheers. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. Nobody noticed. I sat there in silence, hearing my own heartbeat louder than the voices around me. My mother raised her glass and smiled. "We did not want to make a big fuss," she said, "but Abigail deserves this. She is the one with a real family now. A future. This house belongs with her." I stared at the envelope in Abigail's hands. I knew it was not real. The paper was not legal. It held no power. But what hurt was not the attempt to give her the house. It was the belief that I would say nothing, that I would allow it, that I had no place to protest. "Is this not wonderful, Eleanor?" Abigail said sweetly. "You will always have a place here. The attic will be yours as long as you need it." There it was again. The attic. The symbol of everything I had been reduced to. I looked at each of them. My father holding his glass with pride. My mother still clapping. Abigail already talking about changing the wallpaper and expanding the kitchen. None of them looked at me like I mattered. They had written me out of the story of our family. They believed they were entitled to my silence, my obedience, my space, and still I said nothing. I stood slowly, walked away from the table, and climbed the stairs to the attic. The door clicked shut behind me. I sat on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. I reached into my purse and pulled out the real deed, the one with my name, legally filed and recorded. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal. This was not about revenge. It was about truth. They thought I was still the girl in the attic, but they had just reminded me who I really was, and what was mine by right. The next morning I came down to the kitchen early. The sun had barely risen, and the house was still quiet. I placed the real deed on the marble island and waited. I did not have to wait long. My father came in first, rubbing his eyes and yawning.
He stopped when he saw the paper. He picked it up, brows furrowing. "What is this?" "It is the real deed," I said calmly.
"The house was never yours to give." He read it twice, then a third time. His mouth opened, then closed. My mother walked in next, carrying her coffee. She looked between us. "What is going on?" "She bought the house," my father said slowly. 3 years ago." My mother frowned. "That cannot be right. We We signed that over to the bank." "But you never said anything. You never asked," I replied. "You were losing it." I stepped in, quietly. Just then, Abigail stormed into the kitchen, holding the fake deed in her hands. "What kind of joke is this?" "No joke," I said. "This house is legally mine." Abigail slammed the envelope on the counter. "You waited until we planned everything, made announcements, gave speeches, and then you pull this?" "I did not pull anything," I said. "I am correcting a lie." My mother's voice hardened. "Eleanor, that was cruel. You embarrassed us in front of everyone." "I sat through dinner in silence while you gave my property away," I said. "I think we are even." My father stepped forward. "You owe us. We raised you. We kept this house running. You would not have had anything without this family." I stared at him. "You mean the house you nearly lost? The house you left buried in debt? The one I saved without your help? Abigail scoffed. You act like we are villains. We are family. Families help each other. You do not get to speak to me about help, I said. I have helped this family for years. Covered bills, sent grocery money, repaired things you did not even know were broken. And every time you acted like I did nothing. You are being dramatic, my mother said. You always were too sensitive. There it was, the old line. The one they used whenever I showed emotion, whenever I tried to speak up. I am not being sensitive, I said. I am setting boundaries. You cannot just take everything, Abigail snapped. You live like a pauper anyway. The money is wasted on you. I looked at her. Really looked. Behind her perfect makeup and expensive clothes, I saw panic. Fear, not for me but for what she stood to lose. This is what families do, my father said. They sacrifice for the good of the whole. No, I replied. That is what you say when you want someone to stay silent. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then Abigail's voice broke the silence. You are being selfish. No, I said. I have been selfless for too long. They all stared at me, stunned. They had never seen this version of me, but I had always been here, quiet, patient, waiting. Now I was done waiting. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in the attic, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the distant sound of Abigail's voice echoing from the master bedroom downstairs. Even after everything, they still spoke like the house was theirs. As if I was just a bitter guest overstaying her welcome, but something had shifted inside me. Something permanent. For most of my life, I had made myself small to keep the peace. I had held my breath, softened my voice, folded myself in half so they could feel tall. I had waited for kindness. I had waited for understanding. I had waited for permission to be seen. And I was tired. I thought about the years I had spent building everything on my own. The nights I worked with aching eyes and sore hands. The clients I had guided through grief, divorce, uncertainty. The homes I had made beautiful and whole. I had done it all while they called it a hobby. While they asked me to bring pie or clean dishes or take the attic. Without complaint, I sat up slowly. There was no sudden anger, no yelling, no dramatic tears. Only a stillness, a clarity so sharp it felt like glass. I no longer needed to explain. Myself, I no longer needed them to see me. I saw myself. They could not hear me because they were never listening. But that was no longer my burden. I rose from the bed and turned on the attic light. I pulled out my laptop and opened my files. I reviewed every legal document, every transfer, every record that tied this house to me. I organized them, printed fresh copies, and placed them in a folder. Then I packed my things. I folded each item with care. I zipped my suitcase slowly. I did not rush. I did not panic. My hands were steady. I would not argue with them anymore. I would not beg them to understand. I was done performing the role of the good daughter. I had carried that mask for too long. Now I will carry only the truth. Downstairs, the house was quiet. I could feel the weight of the family beneath my feet, sleeping soundly in the spaces I owned. I walked to the front door and opened it slowly. Cold air met my face, but before I left, I placed the folder on the dining table. It contained a letter addressed to each of them. No anger. No blame. Only facts. And a deadline. They had 30 days to vacate the property. That was more than fair. I closed the door behind me and stepped out into the night. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright, as if the universe itself had opened up just a little wider to make space for me. I did not cry. I did not look back, because for the first time in my life, I was not walking away from something. I was walking toward myself. The morning after I left the house, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. Her name was Victoria Klein, and she had been with me since the beginning, since the first contract, the first property purchase, the first legal draft of my company. She knew every corner of my story. When I entered her office, she looked up from her desk and smiled softly. Is it time? She asked. I nodded. Yes, I want everything filed, official, immediate. Victoria opened the folder I had given her and began processing the eviction notice. The house was legally mine. They had no lease, no contract, no claim. Just false assumptions and borrowed comfort. "I will have this delivered today," she said. "You gave them 30 days. That is generous." "It is more than they ever gave me." By the end of the day, the letters were printed, signed, and sent by courier. One copy to my parents. One to Abigail. One filed with the local court, just in case they tried to dispute anything. But I knew they would not. They had never seen me as someone who would act. That was their first mistake. The second came 2 days later, when Abigail called, her voice sharp and breathless. "You are being petty," she snapped. "You have no right." "I have every right," I said. "I am the legal owner. You are destroying the family." "No," I replied. "You did that when you tried to take what was not yours." She hung up. Then the messages came in waves. My father texted me a long list of reasons why I was being ungrateful and emotionally cruel. My mother called 5 times in a row, each voicemail laced with disappointment, but I ignored them all. I blocked the numbers and forwarded any future communication to Victoria. Next, I closed the bank account I had opened years ago to quietly help with household repairs. I canceled the automatic payments to their utility bills. I removed myself as a secondary contact on their insurance and removed access to the grocery credit card they had been using for years under my name. Within 48 hours, their comfort unraveled. They were not used to discomfort, not used to consequences. They were used to me smoothing over the edges, fixing things behind the scenes, but I was done being invisible. I returned to my studio, turned off my phone, and poured myself into work. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. No weight on my chest. No false obligation buzzing in my mind. The next morning, my inbox was full. 2 new clients. A podcast invitation. A feature request from an interior design magazine. The world had continued moving forward without their voices in my ear, without their approval, and I had never felt more free. I had not burned a bridge. I had simply built a door and walked through it. And now they were the ones left outside. It took less than a week for everything to begin falling apart. The first sign came from the bank. I received a notification that a large withdrawal attempt had been denied from the old joint account I used to quietly fund household repairs. The account had been closed. I had left just enough to cover final balances. No more. By noon, my father was calling again. I did not answer. Then the credit card company reached out. My name had been listed as the guarantor for a grocery card I had opened for them years ago, back when they claimed they just needed a little help. I revoked my authorization. The card was frozen that same day. Within hours, Abigail sent me a message. "Abigail, what did you do?" "Mom just got declined at the pharmacy." I stared at the screen. Me. She will have to use her own card. No reply. That afternoon, Victoria confirmed the eviction notice had been legally acknowledged. 30 days. After that, they would be trespassing. I imagined them walking through the halls of the house. My house finally realizing that every wall, every tile, every key belonged to me. Not to Abigail, not to the family name. To me. By the 3rd day. My mother emailed me. She never emailed before. It was long and carefully worded. The kind of message you send when you are trying to sound composed. "But your hands are shaking." She wrote that she did not understand where all this was coming from. That I had always been the peaceful one. That Abigail was just doing what was best for the family. She even used the word misunderstanding. I replied with one sentence. There is no misunderstanding, only memory. I included scanned copies of every transaction I had made for them over the past 7 years. The bills I had paid, the renovations I had funded, the groceries,
The gas.
the mortgage payments when they could not make them, every receipt, every wire, every signature. They had seen me as their helper, their backup, their safety net. They had never seen me as their equal. Now they had no choice. On the 6th day, Abigail came to my studio. She banged on the door like she owned the place. When I opened it, her eyes were wild. "You are destroying everything," she hissed. "You think you are better than us now?" "No," I said calmly. "I think I was never." Less. Her jaw clenched. You are going to let our parents be homeless? They have savings, retirement accounts, investments, and your law degree, your big promotions, your picture-perfect life. Figure it out. She stared at me for a long time. You were always jealous. I almost laughed. No, I said. I was just quiet. And you mistook that for weakness. She left without another word. I stood at the doorway for a moment, feeling nothing but stillness. For years I had waited for an apology, a thank you. Some flicker of recognition. Now. I did not need it because the truth had finally spoken for me, and I had nothing left to prove. A week after Abigail stormed out of my studio, I met Emily for coffee. She had been my best friend since college, the only one who had seen my long nights, my quiet victories, and the pain I never dared to name out loud. She had been there when I filed my business license. She had helped paint the walls of my first office. She had cheered me on when no one else was even looking. When I walked into the cafe, she was already waiting with a smile and 2 steaming mugs. You look taller, she said. I laughed softly. Maybe I finally stopped shrinking. We sat by the window, and I told her everything, the confrontation at Thanksgiving, the fake deed, the eviction notice, the frozen accounts. Every word felt like air leaving a long-sealed box. Emily listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, her eyes were full but steady. I am proud of you, she said quietly. So proud I could scream. They say I betrayed them, I whispered. That I destroyed the family. She shook her head. They destroyed your trust, Eleanor. You defended your peace. But it still feels heavy, I admitted. I never wanted to become this cold. You are not cold, she said firmly. You are clear. There is a difference. We sat in silence for a while, watching people pass by outside. The world moved on, as it always does. But something inside me had finally paused long enough to breathe. Emily reached into her bag and handed me a small box. Inside was a keychain leather engraved with one word, enough. It is for your new keys, she said. My new house? No, she smiled. Your new boundaries. I held it tightly in my palm. Later that night, I opened my laptop and drafted an official statement to the family. No emotion. No explanation. Just facts. The house would be vacated by the end of the 30 days. All previous financial ties were severed. All further communication would go through Victoria. I closed the email and hit send. Then I took a deep breath, turned off my phone, and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky open and wide. I walked with no destination, just the rhythm of my own feet. I thought about all the years I had waited for someone to tell me I was doing the right thing, that I mattered, that I was allowed to say no. Now. I did not need anyone else to say it, because Emily was right. I was not being cruel. I was being free. And for the first time that was enough. Months passed like gentle waves, steady and calm. The house was finally empty. The phone no longer buzzed with angry messages. The weight I had carried for years began to lift, replaced by a quiet peace I had never known. I moved out of the attic for good. I rented a small apartment in a sunny neighborhood with large windows and a view of the park. It was not grand, but it was mine, truly mine. A place where I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. My business grew steadily. I hired a team of talented designers and assistants who shared my vision and values. We worked on projects that brought joy to families who appreciated the care and love I poured into every detail. Friends became family. Emily and I hosted small dinners and movie nights. We laughed late into the evening, sharing stories and dreams. There was no judgment, no competition, only support. Some days I thought about my parents and Abigail. I wondered if they had found their own peace, or if the silence between us had become a chasm too wide to cross. But those thoughts came and went like passing clouds. What mattered was that I had found my own light. I no longer needed their approval or their validation. I no longer waited for their recognition. I had learned to recognize myself. One afternoon, I walked through the park near my apartment, sunlight filtering through the trees. I smiled at strangers and greeted children playing nearby. I felt connected to the world, to myself. And to the future I was creating, I had traded the grand family mansion for a quieter, simpler life. But in that simplicity, I discovered freedom. And with freedom came joy. I sit here now, in my quiet apartment, the soft light of the evening casting long shadows on the walls. The house I once called home, the mansion with its polished floors and echoing halls, feels like a story from another life, one I survived. Rather than lived, I learned that family is not defined by blood alone. It is not about who shares your name or sits at the same table. Family is built on respect, kindness, and the courage to stand up for yourself when others try to make you small. The greatest gift I have given myself is not the deed, the money, or the house. It is the courage to set boundaries, to say no when I am dismissed, to walk away from anyone who treats me as less than I deserve. That courage is my real fortune. It is something no one can take from me, no matter how loudly they demand it. I understand now that being underestimated was never my weakness. It was my greatest teacher. It taught me patience, resilience, and the quiet power of believing in myself. To anyone listening, I say this: you are worth more than anyone tells you. Do not let others write your story. Write it yourself, in your own voice, on your own terms. Because in the end, the richest life is the one where you love and respect yourself enough to walk away from what does not serve you. That is the fortune that lasts forever.